There is a silent force that moves the male heart, more than sweet words or promises of eternal love. The right touch, in precisely the right place of his psyche. This is not about manipulation, but about deep understanding. When you grasp how the masculine ego operates, you realize there is a key capable of unlocking not only his attention, but his most genuine affection, his purest desire, and his truest surrender. This script reveals exactly how to access that subtle, powerful point, not through mind games or empty strategies, but through a real connection born from understanding a man's psychological nature. Prepare to embark on a path woven from mystery, wisdom, and emotional intensity. In the end, love will not be the result of chance, but the natural outcome of an inner awakening. Leave a comment below. I choose to touch the heart of the one I love with awareness. To understand how to touch the masculine ego profoundly and make him truly fall in love, it is essential to appreciate how Carl Jung's analytical psychology illuminates the internal structure of the psyche. Jung shows us that the ego is only one part of the whole self, often inflated by defenses that conceal wounds, insecurities, and unacknowledged desires. Contrary to popular belief, the masculine ego is not merely vanity or pride. It is a complex construction shaped by social expectations, projections, and the constant effort to maintain a solid identity in the world. Touching the masculine ego consciously requires recognizing where he projects his shadow, all that which he denies in himself, but which manifests in his relationships. Often a lack of validation, fear of vulnerability, and longing for recognition are masked by displays of self-sufficiency or emotional detachment. When a woman with authenticity and sensitivity discerns these mechanisms and responds with empathy, she does more than touch his ego. She awakens his anima, the inner feminine principle that longs for integration and connection. For Jung, individuation is the process of becoming one's true self, and love can be the most powerful catalyst in that journey. By encountering someone who reflects his forgotten parts, a man experiences a deep, uncontrollable attraction. Thus, touching his ego is more than praise or flattery. It is seeing the man behind the masks and allowing him to see himself with fresh eyes. In that emotional mirror, not only does love spring to life, but also a genuine willingness to surrender wholly. Behind the behaviors many men display, whether self-confidence, emotional coolness, or even feelings of superiority, lies a deep psychic aspect that Jung called the shadow. This hidden side consists of everything a man does not accept in himself, repressed over the course of his life through fear, shame, or social conditioning. When a woman perceives and embraces these unconscious contents without judgment, she touches something he has not even dared face fully. This is the first and most powerful gesture of genuine closeness. The masculine shadow often harbors emotional fragilities he was taught to suppress from an early age. Fears of inadequacy, emotional neediness, doubts about his masculinity, unresolved resentments. These are frequently masked by arrogance, excessive rationalism, competitiveness, or emotional detachment. He learned that showing weakness equals vulnerability, and that vulnerability means defeat. But such lessons have estranged him from essential parts of his own soul. A woman who sees beyond the masks, who views him with the eyes of her soul, enters that territory with gentleness and presence. The touch on his ego begins here, when a woman recognizes these shadows not as flaws, but as unintegrated parts that make him a human being striving for completeness. This does not mean tolerating toxic behavior or annulling herself for the sake of affection. On the contrary, it involves maintaining an integrity that is both firm and compassionate. The feminine presence, when conscious, serves as a non-threatening mirror. She does not accuse or humiliate him, but gently reveals what lies behind his defenses. What happens then is that the man stands before someone who neither feeds his inflated ego nor dismantles it with judgment. This woman shows it is possible to love even what he once thought unlovable. By doing so, she activates in him a sense of acceptance that is as rare as it is liberating. And in that instant, true attraction is born. He feels seen, not for what he shows, but for who he really is. This process has its roots in Jung's idea that shadow integration is indispensable for wholeness. Love is one of the most effective experiences for fostering that integration. Not the idealized romantic love, but that which embraces imperfection and the complexity of the human soul. The relationship thus becomes a space of healing, where the masculine ego can at last rest its defenses and begin to transform. It is important to remember that acknowledging the shadow does not require explicit words. Often it is through silence, active listening, and a non-judgmental gaze that this recognition occurs. A woman who allows herself to perceive the fears underlying his actions, the voids behind his achievements, touches an extremely delicate and powerful psychic layer. The masculine ego, feeling welcomed rather than dominated, responds with something rare: surrender. That surrender is neither immediate nor always conscious, yet it manifests in small gestures. He lowers his guard, shares secrets, reveals parts of himself he has never shown anyone. And this happens because contact with the shadow, when guided well, brings relief rather than threat. At this point, the relationship ceases to be superficial and becomes transformative. Therefore, to touch the masculine ego profoundly, one must begin by recognizing the shadow. This calls for sensitivity, awareness, and emotional maturity. A woman who understands this dynamic assumes the role of silent guide, not directing his path, but illuminating the road. And in that subtle movement, she not only wins his heart, she awakens him to himself. Within every man lies a deep, powerful archetype that Jung identified as the warrior. This is not merely the physical or competitive fighter, but that aspect of the masculine psyche that seeks purpose, aspires to conquer, protect, and overcome challenges. When this part is recognized and validated consciously, the masculine ego not only feels strengthened, but also begins to open emotionally. The inner warrior needs admiration, not for vanity's sake, but because through this validation, he acknowledges his usefulness in the world, and more importantly, in someone's heart. The admiration that touches a man's ego is not superficial, based on empty praise or theatricality. It is an authentic appreciation that recognizes his daily struggles, his dedication, his effort to maintain integrity amid internal and external conflicts. When a woman offers this kind of acknowledgement, without trying to diminish or compete, but seeing the value of his journey, she activates the center of his noblest pride. By nature, the warrior needs a purpose. In many mythological stories analyzed by Jung and his followers, the hero embarks on a journey, faces monsters, crosses deserts, and returns transformed. But that journey is only meaningful because there is something or someone he values deeply. In the modern world, many men have lost this connection with the archetypal purpose of fighting for something greater. Their battles have become internal, silent, and often invisible. A woman who sees and honors these battles directly touches that inner warrior, reminding him of his reason for being. Such validation, however, must be conscious. It means recognizing the effort without inflating the ego. It is seeing strength without ignoring vulnerability. It is understanding that courage lies not only in great deeds, but in daily perseverance, commitment to growth, and the sincere attempt to be better. By communicating this admiration in a subtle and truthful manner, through a look, a gesture of trust, a word at the right moment, a woman becomes a symbol of something the warrior wants to protect and cherish. Jungian psychology teaches us that the ego needs structure to avoid collapsing under life's pressures. Validation from another person, when sincere, functions as structuring energy. It is not flattery, but recognition. The difference between feeding the ego to inflate it and feeding the ego to strengthen it. A man who feels his strength is perceived and respected tends to lower his defenses and reveal other layers of himself, and that is where deep affection is born. It is important to remember that often a man does not realize he needs this validation. He was trained to be self-sufficient, not to depend emotionally on anyone, and not to seek recognition. But that does not mean he does not crave it intensely. When touched by genuine admiration, he reconnects with a forgotten part of himself, the part that wants to be seen as capable, worthy, and respectable. And when such validation comes from someone he cares for, the impact is even greater. A woman who learns to recognize this warrior without submitting, yet without confronting him unnecessarily, establishes a relationship of balance. She need not hide to let him shine, nor extinguish her own light to value his. On the contrary, she stands as someone who sees his effort with clarity and courage, thereby becoming indispensable. Love begins to flourish in this space of mutual respect, where the ego need not defend itself, but may expand healthily. This form of connection moves a man deeply because it unites two essential elements: external recognition and internal emotional connection. His ego feels validated, yet not manipulated. he feels he can trust. And in that environment of trust, affection evolves into something more: commitment, care, and true surrender. A woman who understands the power of conscious admiration is not merely captivating, she is helping another to become more whole. In Jungian psychology, the anima is the archetype of the inner feminine within a man. It is the unconscious counterpart that embodies qualities such as sensitivity, intuition, empathy, and emotional connectivity. It is not merely a psychological trait, but a living presence within the masculine soul that yearns for expression and integration. When a woman connects authentically and emotionally deeply with a man, she awakens that anima, bringing to light aspects he often does not know or represses in himself. In that awakening lies a kind of love that transcends desire or attachment, a love that reveals and transforms. The modern man was conditioned to value control, reason, and action. In the name of strength, he often disconnects from his emotional world, creating internal imbalance. In this context, the anima remains dormant or distorted, appearing projectively. He seeks outside himself a figure that embodies what he cannot find within. Consequently, he often idealizes a woman or falls for feminine images that bear his own inner longings. When he meets a woman who not only reflects these qualities, but invites him to experience them in himself, something powerful happens. He begins to recognize himself in her. That recognition is not rational. It is a profound emotional response that arises when a woman expresses her essence truthfully without hiding or molding herself to please. By showing her sensitivity, her capacity to feel, her intuition, and her empathy, she becomes a symbolic mirror of his anima. He cannot say exactly why, but he feels drawn, touched, transformed. And that transformation leads him to a deeper level of affection, for he is no longer before merely a partner, but a presence that arouses in him a new way of being. A woman who lives her femininity with awareness does not need to teach a man to feel. She only needs to be herself. Her presence, her words, her listening, her way of being in the world communicate something that touches his soul silently and powerfully. This emotional connection allows him to break free from the rigidity of ego and reconnect with his subtlest essence. He begins to see that there is beauty in feeling, strength in vulnerability, and that love is not loss of control, but expansion of the self. This process is often uncomfortable for a man, as it demands he face all that he was taught to deny. Yet it is equally liberating. By engaging with his anima, he starts to integrate emotions, understand his relationships better, and handle his feelings with greater maturity. He becomes more whole, and in this journey, the woman who instigated this opening becomes unforgettable. She did not merely attract him, she initiated him into a new stage of his psychic journey. It is crucial to emphasize that this activation of the anima does not stem from manipulation or strategy. It occurs through the authenticity of a woman who lives her own femininity with integrity. The more she knows, respects, and expresses herself truthfully, the more she becomes a natural channel for this awakening. The man, in turn, responds with a mixture of fascination, reverence, and desire to draw ever closer. And it is in this field of emotional resonance that love becomes inevitable. When the masculine ego is touched by such a feminine presence that resonates with his anima, he ceases to see the woman as opponent or prize. He begins to view her as a portal, a gateway into himself, into the most sensitive, mysterious, and profound aspects of his own soul. And when that happens, he does more than fall in love. He awakens. This is one of the most powerful experiences possible between two people. A woman who understands this holds not a seduction tool but a bridge to a transformative connection. And the man who allows himself to cross that bridge finds, on the other side, not only a woman's love, but the reunion with everything he had lost within himself. In Jung's vision, an intimate relationship is not merely a union between two individuals. It is a symbolic field where the soul is continually mirrored, challenged, and invited to evolve. Love, when lived consciously, becomes a potent path of individuation, of self-knowledge and integration of all parts of the being. For a man, this process is especially intense. For a relationship with a woman who awakens his unconscious aspects also confronts him with all that needs transforming within his ego structure. In such a scenario, the ego, once rigid and defensive, begins to yield space for a more authentic, whole identity. When a man becomes deeply involved, he is not only getting to know another, he is reuniting with himself. Every conflict, frustration, and moment of intimacy brings to light parts of his psyche that were dormant or repressed. He starts to realize, for instance, that his emotional reactions are not solely responses to his partner's behavior, but echoes of old wounds, insecurities, and unmet needs. In this sense, the relationship acts as a precise mirror. It shows not what he wants to see, but what he needs to see in order to grow. It is in this mirror that the masculine ego begins to deconstruct itself with dignity. He sees he need neither sustain masks, nor prove anything, nor fight an unseen war to be loved. A woman who welcomes him without trying to dominate, who confronts without attacking, who challenges without humiliating, becomes the catalyst for his transformation. She allows him to acknowledge his limits, shadows, and contradictions, but also his light potential and true strength. Love ceases to be a conquest and becomes a revelation. Throughout this script, we have delved deeply into how the masculine ego, often shielded by layers of defense, can be touched in an authentic, sensitive, and transformative way. We have explored the importance of recognizing his hidden shadow, the strength of the warrior he endeavors to uphold, the awakening of his anima, and the power of love as a mirror of his individuation. More than techniques or strategies, what emerges here is a path of truth and presence, where love not only attracts but heals, reveals, and integrates. When a woman understands this process, she stops seeking a man's attention and begins to inspire conscious love. And the man, feeling fully seen, surrenders not out of obligation or illusion, but because he finds in that relationship the possibility of becoming whole. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Here, you will find more than relationship tips. You will discover paths to transform your emotional journey into something profound and true. And don't forget to watch the recommended video on screen. Your transformation begins with a fresh perspective and with a conscious choice.